the beginning of my career, HR was looked at as a necessary evil, and now it's completely flipped to where HR is the driving force for how companies grow and expand.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey everyone, Ben Eubanks here, host of We're Only Human, and so glad to have you. Today we're going to have a good conversation. If you've followed me for any length of time, one of the things I'd love to talk about are skills. And yes, I'm a nerd, I'll admit it. But I love talking about skills and how we can use those to make better decisions at work. What if you could tell what the skills are that your people have so that you could tap into those whenever you need them for a project, for building a team, for solving a problem at the business level? So today we're going to dig into that in the discussion today, talk about it in some actionable and practical ways. I'm really excited to have Eric Storm here from Starmind on the podcast to talk about this. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, Ben. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing phenomenal, sir. Glad to have you here. And as I'm saying your name out loud, it makes you sound like an action hero. I don't know if you ever heard that one before. Eric Storm,
oh, yeah.
The novel. Here we go. So tell us who you are and what you do just to get us started.
Yeah, Eric Storm. I lead the organization's American arm for Starmind. I have personally a unique background. I've been in recruiting. I've been in recruiting tech. I've sold workspaces. I've sold end user experience tools, and it's all led me to Starmind, where actually 2 days ago celebrated my full 1 year anniversary, which is really exciting. Our goal is to essentially utilize AI to empower organizations to maximize on their most important asset, which is the human beings that are employed by that organization. Maximizing not only what they can do with the skills that they have, but also encourage them to grow and expand their skill set to potentially grow both internally with the organization and personally as well.
I love that. So we're going to wrap in a couple things that I love today, because the AI piece is one of the things I also know and love.
Yep.
It's funny. This morning, I actually had a call with a woman from France. She's actually doing her dissertation and she's doing some research on AI and skills and learning. And this is like candy for me. I'm getting a chance to talk about everything I love. And then for you and I get to do it all over again. But one of the things you just said reminded me of something she was asking. She said, how does AI factor into this thing about people wanting to know more, wanting to learn? Do people actually want to learn and grow? And I'm like, my belief is yes. Absolutely. I think the evidence shows that people want to learn, want to grow. And so again, sorry, I'll take a little side segue there down a rabbit trail. Not the last one, I promise you.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think you can look at it two ways, right? You can look at it as people that are in your organization that want to grow are going to leverage any platform or any tool or any learning and enablement software to be better. And the folks that won't. So you can identify who's the most eager employee, who's really bought into the company mentality just by who's looking to really advance.
Yeah. Yes. So one of the things, let's talk about the skills piece, because I don't want to jump too far down into the technology stuff, because that's where my default is. That's what I love. That's what I do day to day. So let's take a step back for a second and talk about the skills piece. Most companies I talk to are struggling in some form or fashion. Either they're like, we don't even know where to start, or we're starting, but it's way harder than we thought it was. We're trying to understand the skills of our people, and it's not easy to do. Talk about why that's such a challenge, what the limits are of just trying to do that with raw human power, and we'll explore that a little bit before we go deeper into how to take advantage of that.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. Right now, companies are utilizing outdated platforms and outdated ways to really capture these skills. And even when they have them, every human is flawed, and every human has a different perception of themselves than potentially what they truly have as a skill, right? So if you're utilizing platforms where you're self-identifying skills, I might say I'm better at something because I think I'm better at something, but the data would prove that I'm not. So there's that side of it. There's other ways that organizations are looking to identify skills, whether it's through reviews or project plans and things like that. And these things become outdated. There's no true like insight data that's coming out of it. It's very in the line, skill A, skill B, skill C. The problem is even when you have that, right? So it's loaded by the people that are self-identifying or through their bosses identifying skills. How do you feed that and how do you help them grow those skills into sort of their next role? Or how do you take those skills and map out the organization for the future? And that's where I think a lot of things are just truly getting lost.
So you mentioned the self-identification, and I definitely agree, right? Where I've laughed. I've probably told the story on the podcast before, but I still flash back when I talk about self-identified skills. There was a person that I brought in for an interview years and years ago for an engineering role, and he brought along with him this big binder. Now, what is this thing? And he opens it up at the end of the interview and it's like, hey, look, here's all the training classes I took. And the person was very nice, but during the conversation, they kept jumping in and talking over all the other interviewers. They actually told the interviewers like flat out, hey, you're wrong about that, even though they were not. And so they were like in your face. And the very first thing, he opens this binder up, the very first thing on top of that for a training class he had taken was for interpersonal skills. I was like, okay. So yeah. I laugh about that because we think we're better at things than we are. And the other way I've seen a lot of companies doing this is actually our research. We did a study last year about how companies identify the skills of their people. And the number one way they're doing that is having a manager say, okay, Eric has A, B, and C as skills. And again, the problem with that is very similar. Research shows we have a lot of biases in how we make decisions and how we, what clothes we choose to wear and where we eat. Decisions about that are biased, much less about other people and what capabilities they have. So those things, the way we typically do it, they're not accurate, and there's some issues there with really getting to the actual root of that. And even beyond that, how many, if I asked you right now, point blank, think about the people that work on your team, how many skills do each of those people have and how deep do they go? It would be really hard to do that, much less for that second circle past them, that second layer past them. So it's really hard to do that with human power. We just don't have that ability to juggle that much information and see that clarity without being biased or without having some depth there. It's really tough to do.
I completely agree with you. In addition, even if you try as a manager to identify the skills, there's probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of skills that I could potentially align to each person. And likely whatever company is feeding me a list of skills that I could check off or give a score to, that doesn't even come close to capturing all of the sort of outlying skills outside of the core 5 or 6 that my company wants me to measure.
So talk about, so we get that that's a problem. That's a real issue. It's hard to measure them. It's hard to know what those are. So if we had the ability to do that, if we snapped our fingers and could actually understand and see the skills that people have, what does that enable? What opportunities does that open up for an employer, for a team, for a manager to be able to actually leverage those things?
It falls in 3 ways, right? At an organizational level, right? At the tippy top, through the direct manager for enabling career progression for their employees, and then truly the employee themselves. So at the top, from an organizational level, as the executive team is planning for the future, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, what is our organization going to be? What is it going to become? And with that, what types of employees and what types of skills do our employees need to be able to operate in that way in 5 years, in 10 years? At a management level, or whatever manager, it really doesn't matter what function, but generally, you try to keep your direct reports engaged and excited about working for you and the company by giving them sort of a line of sight into their next role. Where do you want to be in a year from now? Where do you want to be in 3 years from now? So a manager can potentially take the current skills that they see in their employees and provide insight to either a learning and development platform or other internal jobs that might be open that person might soon be qualified for, giving sort of that excitement to come to work, to want to learn, to want to advance their career to their direct reports, which only, in my opinion, makes that manager much more valuable to that employee because the manager then is looking out for that person's career. And then vice versa with that same relationship, an employee who might have some great skills wants to take the next step in their career, the company can identify what they've done in the last however many months or years within the organization, plus their resume from the past. Combining all these skills together, you might be ready for this role. Should you take this class, or should we develop this new role? Your skills align to that. The overarching theme is that essentially workforce planning for each tier, that it's accessed differently, it's utilized differently, but ultimately it's the same scenario.
That reminded me, one of the things you said there about the manager really giving some excitement to that person because they're paying attention to their career and helping them to grow and to learn. There's back in episode 24, I interviewed a pair of authors that had written a book called The Best Team Wins. And one of the phrases from that book that stuck with me in the last couple of years since I interviewed them was, every single one of us hates micromanagers. Someone who wants to stand over your shoulder and tell you, hey, you should have done it this way. You can do it that way. Here's my quote unquote advice, or I'm telling you how to do it this way. And none of us love that. But they said, if you will micromanage someone's career and help them and always be relentlessly focused on giving them support and mentorship and the resources they need to grow and advance their career, they'll love you for it. It's a little different. Don't micromanage the work, help them micromanage their career. And that's one of the things that popped out when you said that, stuck with me, because I feel like we managers often, because it's easier, we're comfortable, we default to really focusing on the work and only stressing about that. And the person, their job is to stress about the work. Whether we pay them to worry about their work.
Yeah. I've worked
to focus on the leadership piece.
I totally agree with you. And I've worked in large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies before. I'm working in a startup environment, and it's always the same, right? You always want to empower the people that are working for you, and you can do that much easier by addressing their shortcomings, like not in a negative way, but in a, hey, these are areas where you could be better, and you'll make yourself more valuable to the company should you improve them. I would love to hear that. I would love for my boss to tell me, we love you, you're a great asset to the company. Here's where we want to work on. Let's get this area a little bit better while you're still doing a great job on the other side. I loved hearing that when I was, a sales rep. I like hearing it now as a vice president from my leadership team. So it's definitely resonates with me the way you're saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to say that there are wrong ways to do that. Hey, you need to work on these things. Good luck. Go figure that out. But to say, we see, like you were saying a minute, the career pathing piece of that, we see a future for you. We see what you're lining up to be next because you are doing an amazing job. We can't wait for you to get to that. But here's the things that you need to fill in from a skills perspective in order to be ready for that. That's incredible. That's a great conversation too, because it's actionable versus saying you need to get ready for that next level. If you want to move up someday, you've got to be ready for what that entails. That's too vague, too general. No one can actually take an action to fill those gaps. But to say you need A, B, and C as skills, and here's how you can get them. Here's a mentor you can select on the company. Here's a resource we have for you, a training resource, to be able to plug them into those actionable things. That gives you a lot of control, or at least a sense of control over your own destiny. And that's exciting for people. I love that piece of it.
Can I make a note on one thing you just said, which I also just rang to me. You said finding a mentor internally, right? Which I think every company that I've worked for and that I know of, they have some sort of mentorship program. But imagine if you could match a peer who had a deficiency in a certain skill set, was right for the job, could do the job, but match them up with that peer who had the opposite, and they could teach each other. And some of the things that employee A has that are very strong, employee B is weak, and vice versa, and match those two up, then they're going to get better together, not just as a mentor-mentee relationship. But that all comes with understanding the skills that they currently have.
Absolutely. I've seen some fun stories about people doing that with upward mentoring or reverse mentoring, whatever it's called, where you pair someone up that is younger with someone who has more experience, but doesn't think about things in the same way. Hey, by the way, the new tools we have, we can do that twice as fast as we used to do that manually. Let's talk about that. And at the same time, there's obviously good things coming from the person who has more experience down the line as well. We can stay on that for a long time.
No, we could.
One of the things, so we've talked around what Starmind does a little bit, but I want you to be specific, if you don't mind. I want you to tell us how that works, because I want to ask you, obviously it feeds into the conversation today, right? We're talking around it a little bit, but I want you to talk about specifically what Starmind does for a second, because I want to ask you about some examples and some stories. I'm willing to bet you probably have a few of people using that to solve some problems around these skills, these pieces we've been talking about. So take a few minutes and tell us what Starmind does, how it works, and how customers are using it.
Yeah, so Starmind began as between two gentlemen, a neuroscientist and a computer scientist, and they wanted to find a way to seamlessly feed questions and get answers to neuroscience concepts and principles across a group of 50,000 neuroscientists globally. So the algorithm is built on these neuroscience principles where concepts and words and tags and people essentially are interconnected in the same way that the neurons in your brain are connected. As we've matured as an organization, we've essentially built a platform that builds from data, builds skill profiles from data, takes that data, enhances it with a Q&A platform, and then allows for access through an integration layer into really any piece of software that is API driven that's within the corporate walls. So on the connector side, we learn from over 200 different types of software. So we go in, we're PIA compliant, we're GDPR compliant, because we only look at public data. So we learn from these connectors. The algorithm, depending on how many connectors an organization wants to use, typically we're looking at documents, we're looking at HRS systems, we're looking at collaboration systems, potentially specific like Salesforce or Jira, those types of solutions, just to gather as much data on the people within the organization as we can. The algorithm generates the skill profiles, and then through an integration, whether that's Microsoft Teams, whether that's ServiceNow, whether that's Workday, whatever it might be, that or your intranet potentially, whatever way that your organization tends to go look for data and experts, that's where we would put it. And then the algorithm continues to learn in real time as your employees in your organization interact with the platform. So is that enough? Do you want me to go into a little more detail?
I think that's a good understanding for the audience. So again, we're talking about the skills piece, and
yes,
the reason I wanted you to talk in some specifics there is because it still seems almost like a pipe dream to say, yes, we can understand what the actual skills are of your people. You're like, yeah, okay. Because the default we think of is, okay, it's just a dumping ground where they can all go and say, okay, I have these skills. We already talked about how that's an issue. We can't just use someone's own perceptions of what they can do, because that's not always accurate. We can't use just the perceptions from a manager. So I love that you're pulling in from these different sources that are objective, that don't have any bias to them, and using those to really build a profile of what people can do and what their capabilities are, because that helps to create a better picture. And again, the more you can add in there, the more layers you can add in there, the better it's going to be. Like, go math nerd on you for a second, but like vectoring, right? One yes. Line is hard. 2, you see where they cross. 3, you can see where those 3 cross, and you can start to get closer and closer approximations of what someone's actual skills are. That works better in a visual environment. We can show you on a slide. I actually have a slide for that. I know you're not surprised about my me pulling that out in a slide somewhere, but I used that actually in a talk last week to explain how having these different layers and different perspectives and different sources of data about any individual person and any individual skill can create a really clear picture of what they can do. And it's easy to forget sometimes. I even forget this sometimes. We're talking about this. We say someone's skills, but every single skill they have, it's not always a yes, no. Sometimes it's a yes and how much on this spectrum. And a lot of times it's that case. And that's what makes it really hard. That's what also really excited me when we had the conversation the first time. I got to see the platform, what you guys are doing, because I was excited to think like, we can actually start to solve this problem now. Again, it's not a human thing. We can't do that with humans. We don't have enough. Nobody has unlimited budgets to hire 1,000 analysts to come in here and look at all your skills. But the technology, the AI, can actually solve that problem for us and give us a much clearer picture of that. And it's really, it really excites me.
And the other side of it is a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier, where a lot of it's self-identifying, a lot of it's manager identifying. Our algorithm works in real time. So as new skills come to people based on interactions, based on new projects, whatever that might be, the algorithm continues to update the skills. So just like the brain, where the brain will forget things from third grade science class. The brain will use time to forget things about certain people. I'm going to go into a more specific example around one of our large customers, Accenture. And this is a piggyback, but if a consultant was on a project 5 years ago implementing an on-prem installation of SuccessFactors, and then last year they did a full implementation of Workday Cloud, that the skills from 5 years ago are certainly relevant, but much less relevant than their skills now around Workday. So our algorithm will also weight skills based on the relevancy and the time series essentially of how close it is to now, to weight the level of the skill. So it's pretty amazing. I've been in tech for a while, but to hear the AI team and my CTO talk about what our algorithm does, I'm always just blown away with what we do.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Again, there's so much fun there. So you mentioned Accenture, the work that they're doing. Any other stories, examples, things like that you want to throw one out there if you don't mind, just to give us some idea of how someone might be using this?
Yeah. So just quickly, a little more on Accenture. They use us specifically to staff projects. So we've hooked into 4 different connectors, and then the 5th one is the calendar. So we're able now not only to identify the skills that the consultants have based on the project outline, but they're also placing consultants who have availability to different projects down the road. So it's not only aligning skills, but it's helping them staff their projects. In addition, they're able to find information a lot faster. So we've created a true ROI with them, which is exciting. We have a huge customer in the US, a large retail bank that I'm not allowed to say publicly, but their biggest problem was not so much on the HR side, but more specifically routing questions to the right experts when it comes to IT and HR help desk. So everyone has FAQs, everyone has an intranet, but they were seeing a significant uptick in ticket generation because people kept coming with the same questions, or the question was getting forwarded to the same person over and over again. And with this, based on the skills that we were able to pull from their simple SharePoint that they use from across the entire global help desk, they're now routing questions more intelligently because the skills are identified. And this person is the expert in this, and this person is the expert in this. So because we have the skills mapped, the questions are then answered faster, which saves them money, significant money in the long run. We're still proving that out, but the initial phase it's been great. We have a huge consulting organization that uses us primarily in Europe from a skills perspective to some of the things we talked about earlier, where they're looking for people to grow with the organization. They've identified people based on the skills that we show them as the leaders in the organization, the sort of like up and comers and the laggers, and then manage those people the right way to say, hey, we see that you have abilities here. We really think that this is a good angle for you, or a good direction for you to move internally within the organization. And then the up and comers, it's the same thing, right? Hey, we want to feed you a little bit more. We want to pair you up with different groups so that you can learn and enhance your full skill set. And the laggers, there's coaching conversations there, but for a different reason. But as we're talking in the HR vein here, I thought that was pretty relevant.
That's okay. I was going to say, one of the things that occurred to me as you were sharing those things, because you talked about faster responses leading to cost savings, is for the people listening to this, many of them work in HR, they work in talent, they work in learning. And so we're always looking at problems through that lens of having better skill data maybe help me to tailor the training, or may help me figure out how to do the career mobility piece, or who to hire, those kinds of what skills do we not have so we can hire for those. And the thing that I always caution that audience on is we need to be thinking at the same time about the business challenges. Hey, we've got a quality issue over here that can be tied back to skills. Or we've got an issue, hey, our revenue dropped in this one division, what's going on there? That, again, maybe tied back to skills. Who knows? But until we start digging into it, it's hard to quantify that. But that's the conversation you start to have when other people invite you in. They say, hey, we've got a business issue, and we need the people who are in charge of talent, the people who are in charge of the most valuable resource we have. Absolutely. As you started out today talking about the humans in our business, we need those people in the room because they can help us to sort this out and figure out what the issue is and how to solve it using the application of skills, which is how, again, every problem gets solved in some form or fashion that way. But if you can do that globally at a higher level, that creates some really great strategic conversations where you can impact the business, not just say we've got a better succession planning, approach or better way of solving this talent challenge, but of solving a real issue that our business leaders stay awake at night worrying about because they don't know how else to solve it.
Yeah, Ben, you and your listeners, I'm sure, are read about this type of stuff all the time. But I read an amazing article. I forget exactly where it was, but it was basically explaining how every company is looking to the future. What does the future look like? What does the future of work look like? What does the day-to-day, what does the technology landscape look like? And all of this is being driven from the CHRO office, right? It's all about the people. It's all about the people and what skills they possess and whether or not they can move forward. And really companies are the way, when in the beginning of my career, HR was looked at as a necessary evil. And now it's completely flipped to where HR is the driving force for how companies grow and expand. And the skills really is at the center of all that. And how the CHRO office and all the talent acquisition and all the other HR functions, learning and development, can truly enhance and feed and make a business work better, right? Work more efficiently. It's that simple. This
has been tremendous for me. I've enjoyed this thoroughly. Again, any chance to nerd out on the skills piece, the AI stuff, all those things. This, as I said with the call that I had this morning with the researcher, this is like candy for me. If someone wants to know more about Starmind, the work you guys are doing, the kind of companies you mentioned some of the stories are on the website. If they want to know more about those kind of things, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, two ways. You can go to starmind.ai, Starmind, just as it sounds, .ai for artificial intelligence. You can learn a lot about our use cases, about some of our customers. There's testimonials. We've got white papers. All that kind of stuff is right there for you at your fingertips on the website. If you're looking at having a deeper dive conversation with either our technical team or just curious more, want to have a more candid conversation, feel free to reach out to me, Eric, ERIC Storm, like thunderstorm. Sorry to say it like that, but Eric Storm, look me up on LinkedIn, shoot me a note, or it's eric.storm@starmind.com. I'm happy to jump on a call with anyone. I love talking this stuff.
Excellent. Wonderful. I really appreciate you, Eric. Your time is valuable, and I appreciate you spending some of it with us today, riffing on this stuff, digging into it. It's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, Ben, I always love talking to you, and happy to join whenever you want me. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. To everybody else, I hope you got as much out of the conversation as I did. I have a bunch of notes over here, and I can't wait to dig back into them and start thinking about how some of these things tie into the other work I'm doing. To everyone else out there, we'll see you next time. We're on the Human. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.